Welcome to the Humboldt Network of Family Resource Centers video tutorial on how to access the files, reporting forms, and report crunching tools for HNFRC's use of the Protective Factors version 2 retrospective survey. So to begin, we will look at how you access the basic forms that will be printed out and handed to a client, as well as the user manual for the PFS2 and any of those derivative documents that begin with the makers of the tool. From there, we will move over to the internal drive system for HNFRC, where sites and staff will report survey responses through Google Forms on the front end. And finally, we will navigate to where sites will enter a crunching tool where you can look at, for any reporting period and by any site, region, or the group as a whole, how many reports have been submitted and what are the output scores. So let's begin. In order to find the basic PFS2 printout tools, the user manual, those fundamental documents that you might need to get started here, we have those in the HNFRC drive in our member resource library. So I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to navigate to Google Drive. And I'll log into my hnfrc.org based account. From there, everybody's drive will look a little bit different, although if you are in your HNFRC accounts drive, one of your core folders will be the HNFRC member resource library. So we're going to go ahead and access that. Within that folder, you'll see an array of subfolders. The one that will be of interest to us for this tutorial is the Protective Factor Survey printout materials. Once inside there, you'll see a subfolder at the top, which is archived PFS1. That's the original first version of the Protective Factor Survey that we no longer use. It's there for record keeping and nostalgia, but not part of what we'll be using in the tools going forward. Below that, you'll see a page with some links for some PFS2 materials. You'll also see a PDF. This is the printout version of the PFS2 retrospective survey. That's the survey format that we will be using. I'm going to open that up, and you'll see that this is a 7-page printout that covers the basic information that your site and your staff will gather about a client that you're issuing the survey to. It then follows with the actual Protective Factor Survey questions for that client, navigating through those quickly, and then it'll move to sections on child data that the parent will answer, and finally some demographic questions for that client. This file and that printout survey is the basic document that you will use on the most front end working with a client. That's how they will fill out their Protective Factor survey. If you have questions, curiosities, things that you want to learn more about the PFS2 retrospective survey in its totality, the makers of the tool, the Friends National Resource Center, created a user manual, and we've also added that into the member resource library here. That's a 60-plus page document. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it's got everything from how the tool was tested academically to the subscale scores to instructions on how to deliver it to a client. It's got the works. There are a few more documents here. Again, we'll just open them and then keep moving. One is a staff guide for administering the PFS2. If you or your staff would like some additional insight on how other folks approach delivering this survey and implementing it into their programming with clients, this is a file that you might want to open and look at. It's my understanding that Friends has also produced some video tutorials on how to issue the survey and what things to be considering in that. Again, purpose and use of the PFS2. This one's a nice short 2-pager, could be worth it to read through. But it essentially covers what kinds of programs will use this, what kinds of information it gleans and what it doesn't, and the basic know-how. Okay, I'm going to recap how we got here, and then we'll move on to the next section. So if you want PFS2 printout materials, you will go to your HNFRC account, log into your Google Drive, and from your root drive folder, where you can see all of your main folders, you'll go to the resource library, you'll go down to the Protective Factor Survey Printout Materials subfolder, and you'll enter that subfolder, and there are the files that we just looked at. Now we're going to segue over to what you do once a client has filled out a PFS2 survey. And at this stage, you'll be looking at how we, as HNFRC staff and interns and whoever else is going to be working on our team, will input those survey responses into our HNFRC drive to build up our outcomes database. So I'm going back to the main drive folder. You're logged into your HNFRC account, and now we're going to navigate to a different root folder, and that's going to be HNFRC, DHHS, Reporting, and PFS. There's Protective Factor Survey. We'll enter that folder, and you'll see a couple of subfolders up at the top. We've got Report Data Crunchers up here. We'll come back to that in a little bit. That'll be our last step. But down below here, you'll see some purple Google Forms, and they've each got their names and their numbering. If you can't read them too well, you might want to zoom out on your browser. That could be Control- or Control+ on your keyboard can help you zoom in or out of your browser. I'm doing that right now as a reference. So now that I've zoomed out a tiny bit, I can see what all these files are called. And going down here, you will see PFS2 Retrospective Survey Entry Form for HNFRC. Let's enter that. That's the one. And now I'm going to zoom back in so that you can read what I'm reading. So your client has filled out their PFS2 retrospective survey, and you are ready to input the data so that HNFRC has it. A couple things to know about this form once we get to this online setting. All of the data that your client will remit to you that will go back to HNFRC is completely anonymous. There is not any identifying information in it whatsoever. There's no names. There is no coding of any kind that can be traced back to a person. What there is there's an opportunity a little bit down here for you to give a numeric code to your client, and you alone can hold that code and then use that later if you want to be able to reference that survey response back to your original client. For example, you could record the code in this form. We'll look at that section in a second, and then also write the number down on your client's paper copy. And again, your staff, your team alone would be able to connect the dots on that one. Nobody else would. So going through this, the form should automatically record the email account that you're logged into. I would have advised that you are logged into your HNFRC account to access this. That's how you even get through the drive in the first place. And then just for redundancy's sake, it will ask you to type in your email address again. The email address that you type in here will be recorded in the drive. I believe the email address that it automatically generates is going to be the one that the receipt for this survey will be sent to. So once you've fully filled out the survey, it will actually email you a copy of your entire submission, and along with that copy, it will email you an edit button. We'll look at that in a moment. So the survey here is almost entirely, in fact entirely, a regurgitation of the exact information that is gleaned off of the printout PFS2 form. So you'll record which site are you with, and you'll select one. You'll see that these questions have an asterisk with them, which means that they are going to be required, meaning you cannot hit the submit button at the bottom unless you've answered that question. Some other ones down below, like the demographics, will not have an asterisk. So for example, if a client has not filled out certain sections, you will still have a way to fill out the survey in its entirety and turn it in, even if you're filling out, hey, they didn't respond to that portion. Next here, we've got what date was this survey completed by the client. This is one of the most important pieces of the entire input form. So when our group goes to draw reports on which sites have completed what surveys with what outcomes and what date range, this date that you input here is the date that matters for all of those reports. So you might input this report on August 10th, but the client may have filled it out back in June. That's okay. Go ahead and you'll put the date in here that the client filled out the survey. That's the date that matters. And then just know that later on when somebody goes to crunch a report and they select a date range, that date in June that you're going to identify for the client, that was the date that will show up in that range. If they select one that begins in August, it's not going to find that form naturally. So we'll fill this one out. June 15th, 2021 was when that client filled out their survey. More questions: what language version of the PFS survey was used? We'll use the English one. It's my understanding that right now at this very moment, as this is being recorded, HNFRC only has an English version of the PFS2 retrospective. It is my understanding that the group will be exploring getting a Spanish version up and running quite soon. So if you do have a Spanish version later, you would select the option for a Spanish version. Likewise, those printout files, if and when we do get a Spanish version off the ground, will be located back in that PFS printout subfolder that we navigated through the HNFRC member resource library. Moving on, we talked a little bit ago about assigning a numeric code only if you want to, and it's completely anonymous to help you, as your site alone, trace back what survey responses went with what forms that were filled out. So maybe I will call this client 17832. And there we go. And I might write that here and then maybe also pen that out on their form. If I don't want to do this, or if your site doesn't want to have this process in place, not a problem. These surveys can be completely anonymous, and that's the goal. Now we're getting into section 2, program information. These questions are really the exact questions in their exact order as they appear on the PFS2 printout form. So you should be able to just cruise right through here if you're looking at that paper copy that the client filled out and have all these answers. Again, you'll see an asterisk, so just keep trudging ahead. I'm going to move through these quickly. Some of the questions are multi-choice and you can only select one. Some will have checkboxes and you can select as many as apply. Just be careful when you have checkboxes that you don't select things that are obviously contradictory. Again, referencing your form, that shouldn't be a problem. But for example, if you say the participant has not been reported to CWS and then they've also been reported before the program and during, well, that's pretty contradictory. However, they could have been reported before the program and during. Those are not contradictory. Just use common sense and good judgment. It's not going to break anything major if somebody makes a minor error on this, but it is good that we input quality data. Good data in is good report out. So then some questions are going to be conditional on a prior question that just says if there was a report that had been made, you know, what happened as a result of that report. You may know, you may not know, that's okay. Or it may be not applicable. Maybe they've never been reported. There are more questions that are checkboxes. There are a few questions that will ask you some numbers. One of the things that the PFS2 retrospective survey records is it asks to see how many hours of service your program initially offered a client, and then following that, how many hours of service that client actually received. I think the group should discuss what are some best practices around doing this, and you are welcome to explore the manual and some of those other tools to see how other folks might look at this. A simple example, and it might be oversimplified, is let's say that you issue the PFS2 retrospective to a parenting program. Your parenting program is an hour at a time, and it's 12 classes long. It would be reasonable to say in this regard that you would offer at the beginning 12 hours to that given family that's filling out this survey. And let's say that you issue the retrospective survey at the end of the program, and that family made 11 out of their 12 sessions. That would be great. Maybe, and again, this depends on your own site's practices and how you record this, that family not only went to all 12 classes, but they actually went to 12 classes and then spent an additional 4 hours with your team for a grand total of 16 hours. You could record that as well. So the goal here is just a rough barometer of, you know, are we losing clients along the journey? Are they taking more advantage of the services than we even originally forecast? I don't think anybody's going to read too terribly far into it, but that's what those two questions are asking, just so that you know. Moving on to section 3, these are the bullet point PFS radio button questions. The important things, and these will look almost identical to the paper format. The one thing that is not identical is that if the client for a given question or a given section did not write anything down, don't make up an answer for them. You'll just record no response for that question. And maybe they filled out these ones and they filled out these ones. And then here they didn't fill out one radio button, but they did fill out another. Totally okay. Do know that one of the main goals with these surveys is to try to get a complete response back from a client. This survey on the front end side with the client will take them about 10 to 12 minutes to fill out. They probably could go a little faster. It could take some folks a little longer. So it's a good thing to do while somebody's waiting while you make a call or something to that effect. But do know that if there are incomplete survey responses and they are sufficiently incomplete, then certain sections may not actually get scored for that client on the back end. And again, that goes back to that basic premise. As best as we can get complete and good data up front, results in better reports with more complete data that we can chug out. Moving on here again, you will see that all these questions have an asterisk. They are required, and that's just because guaranteed there's something that got answered or nothing that got answered, and you can record that. Working along here. These questions are all just straight through that survey. The numbering even lines up with the numbering in the survey. And you just got to make sure that you answer each row. I almost missed that one. The survey will kick it back and let you know that you need to give an answer to that section before you hit submit so that you have everything answered. All of those above were those radio buttons where you select one item per row. This one in particular is just a set of checkboxes. So in each row, you could select as many as you need to. We'll keep moving down here. One more thing to note, the wording on this form is nearly identical to the wording on the printout survey, but if you ever have a question as to what is the preeminent thing that matters, look at what the client filled out on the survey and look at the exact wording on the survey and run with that. There are a very few number of items here that have just been slightly condensed on our side for the reporting, just to make it fit within our system. The meaning is entirely the same. The client survey is the part that matters. All of these things will be in order. Just go with that approach. If you have a question, that's a fine thing to ask folks, but I don't really think it'll come up. All right, we are getting to the end of the PFS survey. And now there's a section on participants' child information. So again, this is on that printout survey for the PFS2 retrospective. And the way that the survey is laid out from Friends, the printout survey, it has all of the questions for child 1, and then it has all of the questions for child 2, and then all the questions for child 3. We've done a slight switch around here. So we ask the first question, and then for all 4 childs. So you can see that the first question is, what are the children's ages? And you've got your different options here, and then you also have the different children. I believe in the paper survey, somebody will record the age of the child as a number. And the difference in this tool is that we will have it be recorded on your end as one of these categorical elements. So like a prenatal child, an infant, a toddler, a preschooler. This might just take you checking that number and making sure that it fits into these ranges. There are hard stops and starts between each of these. Likewise, there's a section in here that we've added in for adult dependent. It's not explicitly stated in the survey. It did seem relevant to have that included if that was something that a parent was discussing. So you answer that for all 4 children at once, which means that you're going to have that entire page in front of you. And then you do the next question. And the next question for all 4 kids. And the final question for all 4 kids. Again, these are options, so you might be an adoptive parent and a great-grandparent, or rather a foster parent and a great-grandparent. You'll notice that these questions do not have an asterisk up at the top. Once we get into the demographic sections, the child data and the personal data, which is the last couple pages of the printout survey, if somebody didn't fill out a certain section or they didn't fill out anything, that's okay. You don't record that. If they do fill it out, please do record it. So again, if somebody didn't have child 3 or child 4, I would just leave those rows blank. If they simply had answered for child 1 and 2 up here and then for whatever reason did not answer for child 2 down here, that's okay. Record what data you do receive and ask clients to please fill out a complete survey to the best of their ability and allot them, reasonably 15 minutes to do this. It can take a minute for folks to sit down and fill out these surveys. Final section, participant and household information. So we'll fill out these questions. You'll notice in a few of these that there's parentheses next to one that says that it was added. On the printout survey, there are a few questions that have the option other, and then it has a line where somebody would write in an answer. In a big data system like this, write-in answers don't really jive. So what we've tried to do is to add in some of the more common things that we may see in our local area in a write-in so that those options are available to you. Ultimately, if somebody did write something in that is just simply not on this list, we have retained the option of other to keep that available. And again, they may not have answered certain questions and you would just keep moving forward. Down at the bottom here, you'll see that these questions have several added options. These are public benefits participations. This is not an entirely exhaustive list, but it is not a short list either. So we've tried to get some of the most common ones that come up. Okay, let's say that I feel like I have filled out this survey in its entirety. Now, when I go down here to the bottom and I hit submit, if I have filled out all of the questions with an asterisk that are required, it'll submit this survey. If I have not, what'll happen is this will kick me back up toward the part of the form where that question was not fully answered. So we're going to hit submit. I have to prove that I'm not a robot, which is getting harder these days. And there we go. It says that I have recorded my response. It looked like I filled out all the questions that were required. Right here on this page, if I had a last minute I can click and edit my response, or if I have 5 surveys sitting here that I need to upload, I can click the button for submit another response and I can start the next one. Likewise, we talked a little bit earlier about the fact that you will get an email receipt for your survey. That email receipt is right here. It gets emailed to the email account, likely your HNFRC.org account, that you were logged into at the time that you filled out the survey. So when we first loaded it up and it had kind of preloaded our email at the top there, that's the one that will get this survey receipt. And you'll see in that receipt up at the top, it has a button for edit response. So if a day later or something, I find out I have a data issue, I need to go fix it, you could click on that edit button and go back to your original survey response and make those edits. Otherwise, you've just got all of your responses here for your record. You could choose to print this email to a PDF and save it in your hard copy files, or just let it sit there and collect dust in your inbox. That's up to you. Okay, we are moving on to the final section here. And I'm going to go back to the drive and the HNFRC, DHHS reporting, and PFS subfolder. That's that folder that has all of our purple reporting forms. And what we're going to look at in this final section is the data cruncher for this tool. So your site and other sites and 20 different people out there filling out these PFS2 surveys and entering them on the HNFRC system. And what does it all mean? Where does it all go? Well, it goes into our internal files, and then each and all of us have the ability to crunch out reports. So I'm going to enter that subfolder called Report Data Crunchers. I'll scoot back just one more time. You'll see it right here next to all of your purple forms, Report Data Crunchers. And then you'll see a list of the different data crunchers that we have for the group. Do keep in mind, these are live forms. So when you go and draw a report in these, if somebody else is in there working on something, which probably isn't too terribly common, you could be changing the reports that they're trying to draw. Just when we log in, make sure that there is not another radio button up at the top with somebody else. And if there is, wait your turn in line. It's the pros and cons of a live form. More often than not, you'll probably be the only one using it at the moment, and it's up to you to use. So we will go down to the bottom, Z Data Cruncher, PFS2 Retrospective. And you should see the first tab that opens being what's called Query Input. I'm looking down here at the bottom left of the screen, and there's a tab that says Query Input. If you, for any reason, your page shows up and it is something that is not Query Input, then look at the bottom of your tabs, and you can use arrow keys if you need to, and you'll just navigate along and click on Query Input. So the basics, query is to search and to filter data, and input is the data that we are going to input into that query. In this cruncher tool, for your sake, you have 3 things that you will select and your job is done. It's really straightforward and hopefully pretty useful for your site or your region or the group as a whole to use. Your first option is this green cell right here on the Query Input tab, and that's where you select your site. You'll notice just up and to the right of that, it says Note on drop-down options for site. HNFRC means all sites. That means that it'll gather the PFS responses from every single site that's been filling them out if I select HNFRC. If you select a region and it's got which sites are in each region, then the tool will churn out only those survey responses from that region, so from that 3 or 4 site combination. And then if you select any individual site on your dropdown, the tool will run with just that site that you've selected. So maybe you want to, I'm with Arcata or I'm with Lolita and I want to draw a report just for my site. It'll let me do that too. So again, I'll click that dropdown and you'll see that in that green cell, at the bottom right corner of the cell has a little dropdown button. And I get to select through what my options are. And let's say that I am Lolita. Then you'll see there's 2 more cells here. There's a beginning date and an ending date for the report. And if you remember back to when you were inputting the report, that is the date that you identify that the client filled out their survey. So I'm going to go ahead and record the ending date as the year 3000, but you could record it as the end of a fiscal year. And I'll record the beginning date as the beginning of this fiscal year. If I wanted to change those, I could just say 2022 0630. You type it in a year, month, day format, and it's got those guides on the left. You'll type in the ending date first, and then you'll type in the beginning date. And that's because these 2 cells have some data validation features that require that this bottom cell be a day in the future, and that that the day in this bottom cell is on or after the day in the beginning cell. Obviously, you can't have a report that begins in the future and ends in the past. That would be a back to the future kind of thing. So we've drawn our report. We've selected Lolita as our site. We've selected our beginning date for July 1st of 2021 and our ending date for June 30th of 2022. It looks like we're choosing the current fiscal year that we're in as this tutorial has been put together. And I will show you the only other thing that you really need to see. 2 tabs. You'll see one tab that's called Query Output. This tab will show you all of the spreadsheet-based raw data responses that were captured by that site within that period. So it looks like in that range, Lolita has submitted 1 survey. It will likewise, in a different tab here, Charts, the one that actually matters, show you a massive range of different charts that are all the different things that have been completed and submitted by that site and what those survey responses yielded. So it's everything from, how many did the group turn in versus that one site? How many did just that site turn in? What language was the survey being used in? And then it goes down to all the different things that track the survey itself. So there are 38 graphs in total. I'm going to go back there in just a second. I'm going to draw a slightly larger report. We'll go for HNFRC, and I'll go back to the year 3000, because why not? And we'll click back here, and now we'll see that at least we've got 2 responses. It's a brand new tool. Thank you to Cassie and Marcelina for piloting that for us. And so here we go, back to our Charts tab. Again, at the bottom, we're looking at charts. We've drawn our input. Now we're at our charts. And you can see the different data references that come out from this. Here's the thing. not a lot of people like looking at charts in Google Sheets or in Microsoft Excel. It's kind of a not pleasant way to do it. So it's been made nice and simple for you. What you can do is you can print out this charts tab alone, and it will compile a 17-page chart report as an outcomes report for you on the spot, no further action. So let's give that a go. If you're somebody who likes to hit the button Control P to print things, you can do that. Otherwise, you can navigate to the top of your Google Sheets where it says Print and click Print. And you will see right here that it has pre-built a 17-page, neatly cut series of charts for you to look at that has everything from your improvements, backslides, and changes from subscale scores and the protective factors to the child data that you gathered to the participant demographic data that you gathered. It goes from A to Z and covers all of it. Very few things to note. If you have like 3 survey responses, a few of these graphs will probably look a little clunky. Like for example, I'm gonna go way back up to the top here. You'll see that this current report that I'm drawing has 2 responses. And so it offers that, what if somebody filled out half of a survey? It doesn't work like that. But you'll see that these are clean numbers, right? The group submitted 2 surveys, that region submitted 1, that site submitted 1. Once you've got 9 or 10 surveys in this thing, you won't see anything like that. These graphs are just responsive to the number of surveys that they've received. And at very small numbers, they start to break into fractional things. Once you get over 7, 8, 9 responses, you will only see whole numbers. And at the end of the day, the bars are all accurate. So just in case you see anything wacky there, that's something to watch out for. So again, I went to that print tool. I'm looking at this in a print screen. I can hit the button next at the top right, and that will create a PDF of my Google Charts for my PFS2 retrospective survey responses. And there we are. There you have it. You can save this, send it off to a funder, use it for dialogue with your team, whatever you want to do. And drawing these reports is literally that simple. I'm going to go back to the query input. Drawing those reports is as simple as clicking 3 buttons. You select a site, you select a beginning date, and you select an ending date. That will conclude this tutorial for the PFS2 retrospective. Just to recap, we covered at the very beginning how to log in and find the basic printout forms. We then covered at the next phase how to go and input, if a client had filled out a paper survey, input that survey response onto the HNFRC drive. And we wrapped up with how to churn out reports for any site or region and for any period with all the charts that you could need to tabulate that data in 38 different ways. So again, that concludes this tutorial. If you have any further questions on the use of the PFS2 retrospective survey, please reach out to the HNFRC leadership team at the email address leadership@hnfrc.org. Thank you very much.